ingredients for this minestrone soup are what was available this time of the year. It is now mid-March, and so not a lot is growing in the garden, but we do have some really nice things here to add to our minestrone soup. So the first ingredient that we have, and the main ingredient, is a white bean. This can be a navy bean, or it can be any white bean that you choose, but this one has been soaked overnight, rinsed, and then put into the crock pot with some nice seasonings so that it has flavor and adds that to the soup. And the next thing we're going to need is a nice stock. And we want a vegan stock, either a vegan vegetable stock or a vegan chicken stock, which this is. And we need about a half gallon of that. The recipe also calls for 2 to 4 cups of water. And instead of water, I've taken the stock from the beans, and I'm going to use that because I seasoned my beans, and I'd like to have that stock flavor the soup along with my vegan chicken stock. So I'm going to add that back into the soup. We have here some roasted red tomatoes, and they add bulk to the soup as well as their nice thickening agent. They'll add a nice thickness or gravy to our minestrone soup. We're going to add some chopped yellow onion, some bay leaves, some diced potatoes. This is scallion, but you can use leek instead of scallion, which adds a totally different flavor, and it's really delicious. I just didn't have any leeks on hand. This is a dried vegan chicken stock, and this is what this is made of. You can use a vegan bouillon, or you can make your own vegetable stock from roasted vegetables, and then you boil them and take the stock off of them, strain off the vegetables and take the stock and make some. You can make it that way. These are our herbs. This one is crushed rosemary, and then this is oregano, crushed oregano, and we just took the leaf and dried it and then crushed it with a mortar and pestle. Red chili flakes and some garlic powder. We have some chopped fresh garlic, 4 cloves of chopped fresh garlic, sea salt, and sea salt adds a lot of minerals to the diet. Here we have some thyme, some onion powder, some cayenne pepper, and some marjoram. And in this we have tomato paste, a 1/4 cup of tomato paste we want to add, and this also will thicken our soup and add a really nice flavor to it. 3 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil, 2 teaspoons of freshly squeezed lemon juice, and this brightens up the soup and adds just a tiny bit of tartness to it, and it just adds a really nice flavor. You want any type of your favorite small pasta, and you only need about a cup of this. When you're canning your soup, it's best not to add the pasta because starch breaks down into sugars, and you don't really want to add that. It'll become gummy in your soup, and it could cause your soup to spoil. It's not a good preserving item. But when you're ready to serve this soup, you heat it up, add your cooked pasta to it, and oh, that is so good. We have here some chopped celery, a cup of chopped celery, a cup of chopped carrots, the leaves of the baby bok choy, and some fresh dark cabbage leaves. You can also use spinach in here, Swiss chard, any dark green leafy vegetable will add a lot of vitamins and nutrients to your diet. We get beta carotene here. We have carrots. We have yellow squash, summer squash, and zucchini squash. And these are the ingredients that are going to make up our minestrone soup. You don't have to add all of them. You can add some of them and still get a really tasty soup, but I like a thick soup, almost like a chowder. So I'm going to add all of them except the pasta. So let's go over to the stove and let's start this soup recipe to cooking so that we can get it into the jars and preserve food to preserve life. Now, to this recipe, first we're going to add 3 tablespoons of olive oil to a hot Dutch oven. And we want it heated up because we want our vegetables to begin to sizzle. So I started this on low. I'm going to turn it up on medium heat. Let that oil heat just for a second or two. And then I'm going to add my onions. My scallions. Garlic. And that really smells good. We're going to add our celery and our carrots. And we just want these to soften up a little bit and become fragrant. It'll take about 2 to 3 minutes for that to happen. And once they do, we're going to add our tomato paste and salt. And then we're going to continue simmering and adding ingredients. One good thing about the end of the gardening season is there are a lot of soups and stews that you can make. Ratatouille, which is a lot of these same ingredients, tomatoes, zucchini, onions, garlic, the things that come at the end of the season. You can add pumpkin and other squash, butternut squash to them and make a very savory, hearty soup that's very enjoyable in the colder months of the year. Also, when you're canning your soup, we're going to put these in quart jars, but you don't have to do that. If you've got school children and they need lunches for school, try canning them in the wide mouth 8-ounce jars. That makes a single serving for lunch for a child. It's very healthy and nutritious. You can pair that with some fresh sourdough bread and some fruit, and they've got a great lunch, homemade, without preservatives, sugars, additives, or anything that you don't want them to have. So now that this has simmered a little bit and the onions are becoming translucent, we're going to add to this the tomato paste and a little bit of the salt. You want to add flavor and texture to your foods throughout. And even when you're simmering your vegetables, it's good to add salt. Salt draws the water out of the vegetables as well as adding seasoning. Now this is looking really good. So we're going to measure out just 1 teaspoon of this salt to add to our vegetables. So we've got a measuring spoon here. We want 1 teaspoon of this. And we're going to add that to the hot pot. Now these are sweating a little bit. The waters are being released out of the carrots, the celery, the onions, and the garlic. And that is loosening up the tomato paste. It's making a nice sauce. Okay, so to this, we're going to add our squash and our potatoes. And our seasoning. We had some garlic powder, onion powder, some rosemary, some chili flakes. Now chili flakes can add a little bit of heat. And if you're not a fan of heat, then you don't have to add those. And there's a little pinch of cayenne pepper, about 1/8 of a teaspoon of cayenne pepper in there as well. And then we're going to add our bay leaves. Now we don't want this to stick, so we're going to keep moving it around the pot. This smells so good. Now I don't know if you can see how thick that is now. So you can tell that's going to be a nice stew consistency. So what we're going to do at this point is we're going to put the lid on and we're going to let this cook for 3 to 5 minutes just to soften this up a little bit more. And with a Dutch oven, it has a nice snug fitting lid. It's heavy, it traps the steam in, so it doesn't take very long for the vegetables to steam. So between 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes, we're actually going to open this up and stir it real well and then put the lid back on just for another minute or so. Afterwards, we're going to add our tomatoes, our beans, and our cabbage. And as you remember, these are nice roasted tomatoes. To roast the tomato, you would wash it well, and then you don't have to peel it or anything. Slice it in half or in quarters, put it on a baking sheet in a 400 to 500 degree oven, and you want that to char on the outside. When it's nice and charred on the outside, you're going to take it out, cover that baking sheet with some foil or some parchment paper to allow the tomatoes to sweat. And once they've sweated and cooled off, it should take up maybe 20-30 minutes depending on how many tomatoes you have on the sheet. You're going to remove the covering and peel the skin off of the tomato. Once you've done that, you've got nice stewed tomato. You can season that with some garlic powder, or you can even roast them with garlic when they're roasting in the oven, and that adds more flavor and more texture to what you add those tomatoes to. Once you've got them all peeled, they're ready to go into the soup. With your beans, you can use cannellinis. I like the smaller beans. These are navy beans. And I really like the texture, the taste of them, and that they don't add too much to the soup, but they're just right. The other thing about the combinations of beans and potatoes in a soup, potatoes are a carbohydrate, and the starches in potatoes are converted to sugars. Well, sugar, you know, digests very fast. The brain needs that. It's the first form of energy that the brain takes. But in order to slow that digestion down, you pair that with the protein in the beans. You have a nice balance, and you don't get any sugar highs. And your food digests slower, more efficiently, and you're better nourished for it. So you want to have something like a bean, or you could even use, if you were not canning this, you could use a rice instead, or a different bean, or a different form of protein. You could use a textured soy protein instead of the bean if you like. All right, this is ready to begin adding our last ingredients. It's nice and softened, very fragrant. So we're going to put our beans in, and these are our white beans all cooked up. Our tomatoes. And we want the juices as well as the tomatoes. And then this is our cabbage and our bok choy leaves, our baby bok choy leaves. And as I said, you can use spinach, you can use kale or Swiss chard, any green of your choice. You could even use collards if you like. Whatever you have on hand would be very, very tasty and nutritious in this recipe. So now that we've got all that in and we're going to mix it in, we're going to add our stock and the juice that we cooked our beans in. And like I said, if you don't want to use that, you can always put 2 to 4 cups of water, depending on the consistency you want your soup to be. If you like it thinner, add more water. If you like your soup thick and more like a stew, then you add more water. Now this is a half a gallon of vegan chicken stock, so we're going to add all of that. And we're going to see if we even need that. It doesn't look like we need the bean stock. So we're going to save that. I will can that when I can the soup and use that in a different recipe. So now that we've got everything in the pot, we're going to let that simmer. It takes 8 to 10 minutes, and we'll come back and then we will can this. Okay, friends, our 10 minutes is up and our minestrone soup is great. I did adjust the seasonings. I had a little bit more cayenne pepper, a little onion powder, garlic powder, and a few sprinkles more of rosemary. It is excellent. A really delicious flavor. I want you to see the consistency here. It's thick, it's nutritious, it is just the perfect thing to have on a cold winter day or in an early evening after you finish gardening. You want something light to eat. This is not very heavy. Vegetables digest very quickly. There's no extra added oil, only the oil that we sauteed from the beginning. So it is a very good thing to have 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, your last meal of the day. Really, really nourishing, wonderful, comforting. So now the next step is to add a splash of lemon juice. And this is 2 tablespoons. We're just going to mix that in well. And we're going to start jarring our soup. Now, we talked about the pasta before. If you were serving this for a meal today or tomorrow, you would add the pasta to the soup, cook it additional 5-6 minutes just till the pasta is al dente, and then turn it off and serve it hot. You can sprinkle some vegan Parmesan cheese on top, maybe a few chives, and it would be such a delicious meal. But we're not going to add these because we are going to preserve this soup, so we don't want to put the pasta in.